Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving into the art and science of demand forecasting. Now, I know what you're thinking. Sounds a little dry, right? But it's actually this incredible high-stakes balancing act that businesses have to pull off every single day. And it directly impacts what's waiting for you on the shelf and what isn't. I mean, really think about it for a second. Have you ever gone to the store and that one specific thing you wanted is just gone? The shelf is empty? Or, on the flip side, why are last year's TVs or winter coats suddenly 70% off? Well, none of that is an accident. It's all the result of a forecast, a prediction that was either spot on or spectacularly wrong. And that brings us to the heart of the matter, what people in the industry call the Goldilocks problem, right? For any company, whether it's Air Canada figuring out flights or a grocery store stocking up on milk, the goal is always the same: perfectly match what they have with what people want. Not too much, not too little, but just right. Get it right, you're golden. Get it wrong, and it gets very expensive very fast. And expensive really comes in two main flavors. First, there's undersupply. That's when you don't make enough stuff and you leave a ton of money on the table. And then there's its evil twin, oversupply. That's when you have way too much product just sitting around, tying up cash in things nobody is buying. Both of these extremes can be absolutely devastating. So, here's our game plan. We'll start by looking at what happens when things go wrong, the Goldilocks problem. Then, we'll become detectives and decode the patterns in customer demand. After that, we'll open up the forecaster's toolkit, see how a simple prediction becomes a full-blown strategy, and then we'll wrap it all up. All right, let's jump right in with the consequences. We're going to look at a couple of famous case studies that show you just how high the price is when that supply and demand balance gets broken. First up, let's talk about having too little. A perfect example, the launch of the Nintendo Switch back in 2017. Nintendo made this amazing product that everybody was desperate to buy, but they completely underestimated just how desperate we all were. And the scale of this miscalculation was, wow, just staggering. Market analysis suggested people wanted around 3 million consoles every month, but Nintendo's factories, they could only pump out 2 million. So you've got a shortfall of 1 million units every single month. It's a classic trap. How on earth do you forecast demand for a revolutionary product that has no history? The fallout from this was huge. And it wasn't just the millions in lost sales, which is bad enough. You had frustrated customers who couldn't find a Switch anywhere. You had scalpers on eBay selling them for double the price. It really started to damage the brand. You see, it stopped being a supply problem and quickly became a customer experience problem. Okay, now for the opposite scenario, oversupply, or having way too much. For this, let's rewind to the 2008 financial crisis. General Motors was still building cars like the economy was booming, and they just completely missed the memo that demand was about to drive right off a cliff. I mean, this data just shows a massive disconnect from reality. The market was collapsing, people stopped buying cars, but the factories kept turning them out. The result? Over $15.5 billion worth of brand new cars just sitting on lots going nowhere. That's an unbelievable amount of capital just frozen solid. And the consequences were the slow, painful financial bleed. You have to pay to store all those cars, you have to insure them, and every single day they sit there, they become less valuable. In the end, GM had to slash prices with huge markdowns just to get rid of them, which absolutely crushed their profits and put the entire company under enormous financial strain. So, okay, we've seen the dangers. The question is, how do companies even start to guess what the future holds? Well, they have to become detectives. Their job is to find the hidden patterns inside all the noise of customer behavior. And this is basically their secret formula. You see, forecasters don't just see demand as one big, scary number. They break it down into 4 parts: the long-term trend, the repeating seasonal patterns, the bigger economic cyclical waves, and, well, the totally unpredictable random stuff that just happens. So let's look at that first piece, trend. A trend is just a long, slow, persistent push in one direction. Take this chart, for instance. It clearly shows a steady downward trend for Canadian newspaper sales over a whole decade. It's not a sudden drop, it's a slow, predictable shift as people moved from print to digital. And here's the other big one, the seasonal component. Now, unlike a trend, this is a pattern that you know is going to repeat, usually within a year.
Look at toy sales. It's a perfect example. Every single year, boom, you get this massive spike in December. A toy company's job isn't to wonder if the spike is coming. Their job is to predict exactly how big that spike is going to be this year.
Okay, so understanding these different parts of demand is one thing, but how do you actually build a forecast with them? Well, it turns out there's a whole toolkit, and the key is knowing which tool to use for which job. Let's play pretend for a minute. You're Apple. It's 2007. You are about to unleash the very first iPhone on the world. How how do you predict sales for that? You have zero historical data. You can't look at last year's sales because there was no last year. What do you do? Now, contrast that with a completely different problem. You're a big retailer, like Loblaw, and you just need to know how many winter coats to order for next year. Here, the past is actually an incredibly useful guide, right? You can look at sales data from the last 5 winters and find some pretty reliable patterns. And this is exactly why picking the right method is so crucial. For something totally new, like the iPhone, where you're flying blind, you have to use qualitative methods. That means talking to experts, running focus groups, things like that. For the winter coats at Loblaw, where the past is a pretty good predictor, you use time series analysis, assuming next year will look a lot like the last few. And then for industries that get pushed around by the economy, like housing, you use causal methods, where you link your forecast directly to things like interest rates. Different problem, different tool.
But here's something that's really important to get. A forecast by itself is not a plan. Coming up with a number is just step one. The real magic happens when that number gets turned into a strategy for the entire company.
This whole process is called demand planning. It starts with that raw statistical forecast. But then you start layering on human intelligence. The sales team chimes in with what they're hearing from customers. The marketing team adds what they know about an upcoming ad campaign. You take that cold number and you make it so much smarter. And this right here is the ultimate goal. You can't have the sales department using one number while the finance department uses another. That's chaos. The whole point is to create a single consensus plan. One number, one version of the truth that everyone, from the person on the factory floor to the CEO in the boardroom, agrees on and works towards. So let's tie all of this together. At the end of the day, great forecasting isn't about having a perfect crystal ball. It's about systematically reducing uncertainty so you can make smarter, more profitable decisions, especially when the stakes are high. And that brings us to one last thought exercise. Imagine you're a manager at Canadian Tire. It's October. You know winter is coming. You just don't know when that first big snowstorm is going to hit. So what's the bigger risk? Running out of snow shovels right after that first storm and dealing with angry customers? Or getting stuck with a warehouse full of patio furniture that you'll have to sell for half price? What's the right call? Answering that question, that is the art and science of demand forecasting. It's not about being perfect. It's about making the best possible bet with the information you have.